What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's Tuesday. Let's talk about some, 40k and stuff and everything. How's it going, everyone? Hope everyone had a good weekend. We have a lot to talk about today. Oh, my God. I wasn't sure how much we'd have to get across today, but then GW just started dropping some reveals on us about GT 2022, or I guess GT Nephilim, which is, sick. Hope everyone saw the video just before this. Hopefully a couple people came over from that video because I did have them linked together. So, hopefully you saw those too. But lots to get across today on this Tactical Tuesday, and I'm pretty excited about it. So, yeah. Did everybody catch the new spoilers or the reveals for GT Nephilim? We had some rumors confirmed about Warlord trait and Relic purchasing, which is, I think, probably an even bigger deal, in my opinion, than the CP changes. The CP changes were confirmed. Lots of faction secondaries were previewed, especially Astra Militarum, who I was talking with some community members earlier today, when the revealed article dropped, are actually looking like they might be kind of okay in this new season. Is that crazy? If we see maybe some points cuts for Militarum, some debuffs for the top factions, and then they got a whole tree of ridiculously powerful faction secondaries and some other mechanics that are going to be pretty good for them. Ooh, boy. That's pretty okay. That's pretty all right, I think. Yeah. Good stuff. Ooh, boy. But anyway, we are talking about some. We can talk about that a little bit today, chat, if we want to do that. I did put most of my thoughts in that video, but we also wanted to talk about, obviously, results from this past weekend. Had a lot of those going on, which is pretty sweet. I do appreciate everyone who came into the chat before the video started, this morning, and immediately were either very defensive about Tau or very offensive about how Tau is broken. I appreciate that just a thumbnail about Tau being overpowered immediately gets everybody's hackles raised. So thank you, everybody. Lex Fair, Trevi's tactical torture tips. Oh boy. Oh, you don't want to ask me about my torture tips. That is a spicy conversation, I think. I don't know if YouTube is quite ready for that. Woohoo! Yeah, but over the last couple of weeks, at least, the metagame has really been a story of Tyranids fighting Eldari. Some version of Eldari. Harlequin's doing pretty well. Craftworld Eldar doing pretty well. With Tau sort of as the third wheel, it would be Tyranids fighting Eldar, and they would be duking it out for the top table, and then there's a Tau player who's watching, and is hey guys, I'm here too, and then they would get there'd be one Tau in top 5, and then everyone else would be Tyranids and Eldar. But that certainly was not quite the case today, as we can tell by our tournament results right here, with some of the biggest events of the weekend being dominated by Tau, which is crazy. That's so insane. It's the Tactical Tortoise? Yeah, it's Tactical Tuesday, chat. Or Tactical Tuesday. Hey! Ayo! Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Question about Super Heavy Auxiliary Detachment at no CP cost if it matches your Warlord's faction. Great news for Knight players in Incursion games. Don't know what that means, I'm gonna be honest. No idea. Oh, because if you don't fill the super heavy detachment, then it costs Knight CP. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? We can't dig too deep into the preview article text, rules text, I think, because most of the time it's gonna be changed beforehand. Exactly as we saw between last week and this week, right? Because we talked about the rumor that Warlord traits and relics would be moving to paid only, and there were so many questions in the chat about how factions without a Warlord trait, without requisition stratagems, would be able to access them. And clearly they were going to add a generic stratagem for them. They weren't just going to leave those factions in the dust. Fuck you. guard. You can't have warlord traits now. And I think it's the same for a lot of this stuff. So like get hype, but don't, definitely temper your expectations. Maybe it's because of table layout. WTC terrain, Tau don't have much line of sight. Well, I know at the very least, right? So U.S. Open San Diego was played with U.S. Open layouts, which I have heard Tau players complain is bad for them because there's too much terrain on the table, which is clearly bullshit. So y'all can calm down. And I know Atlantic City Open was played with player-placed terrain, which typically gives the defending player the most line of sight blocking possible. So we have multiple events with super heavy terrain layouts that typically are restrictive towards gun lines that Tau won both of them. So I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably not because of the terrain. I'm going to put my foot down and say that Tau are probably just good. So there we go. So I think that this is really interesting because one thing that we can take a look at from the results this week, and we'll certainly talk about some of these other results. We have an Iron Hands at first place, Bemble Clash. Hilariously, I believe this was a final round tie. So the two players tied for first place, which is a little bit awkward. We had some Thousand Suns in top place. We had a bunch of Drukhari doing well. We had some Blood Angels doing well. And honestly, this is, despite the fact that this is one of the most populous weekends for events that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, this is also potentially one of the healthiest. And I will take the opportunity to get on my soapbox here a little bit and talk about the Atlantic City Open results, because we did see, I mean, it's very representative of what we would assume would be the meta game, right? Would be this, it's Tau Tyranids Eldari, and that was basically everything. We got TJ Lanigan in here with a third place at Thousand Suns. Good for him. Although I do think he was the subject of some memery over the weekend because they assigned him some table judges, is what I heard down the grapevine, just in case. So that's good. As well as we've got some Harlequins here. And I do want to give some shout outs. I am in the northeast area of the United States. Jared Vale and Daniel Wilmoth are both relatively, I wouldn't say like in my area, but they're both relatively nearby me. And now my browser window's not working. Cool. Come back. And I do want to give a shout out to them for doing really well. I think I've streamed both of them over the last couple of weeks. I streamed Jared, actually streamed them fighting each other. Jared versus Daniel at Retreat GT, and I was at Portal GT last weekend, which Daniel took second place at. We actually have the result just down here, I think. Yeah, there it is, Portal GT. Second place with Eldari. So both those players really putting up some good results, which is pretty awesome. Line of sight blocking terrain means less when you can just deep strike, right? Yeah, especially since, the Tau game plan right now is so aggressively oriented, right? Like, especially in dramatic contrast to the previous version of the Codex, where it was relatively sedate. Like, you would have these bursts of movement from Riptides and things like that, but they would mostly just be like sort of pottering around like 8 to 10 inches. But now you have things like Cold Stars, you have the 6-inch advanced stratagem, and you can push these units super duper far. Crisis Battlesuit units are running 18 inches. And I think this narrative that like Tau players are just about making these gun lines where they sit on one side of the table and they shoot to the other side of the table is absolutely incorrect. Which is good, because I think that the way that I would prefer to see Tau played is as sort of an aggressive short-ranged gun line, and that's definitely the build that they've created for Tau, with these Crisis Battlesuit teams being able to push really far up the table. Let's talk about some of the lists that did well while we're talking about that. The easy fixes to make other armies OP as well. I mean, you're not wrong, chat. A white Tic Tac in there. I actually think that that it were the 40k metagame to progress as was designed, right? Where we, like, starting from maybe the Grey Knights release onward, and maybe even earlier than that, maybe even just the Drukhari release, we saw all of those factions basically balance up against each other well. The problem was that the factions that were doing well were only maybe 5% of the metagame, and the rest of the game didn't get to play. But if we could release every codex simultaneously at the same power level that we're at right now, the game would actually be sweet, right? Like, it'd just be sick. If, like, we started at release Drukhari and then took every faction and released their codex at the height of its power, the game would be like super dynamic. Every faction would have like tons of cool things to do against each other, and like the metagame would be insane. And obviously it would shake out, and eventually you'd get to like more of a static metagame. But I actually think that the codexes that have been coming out recently are relatively well balanced against each other. The problem is that there are other factions that exist, and they're not being addressed right now, and the codexes are the death of the game. So well, we need to get away from the codex release cycle, and that's a discussion we have, I think, every week. So we don't need to get too far into that. But I was thinking about this the other day, that I actually do think that the power level of codexes were certainly balanced against one another, and that was the scuttlebutt going in, was that there's like sort of a new design team that has been building codexes to fight each other without thinking about the previous codexes. And I think if we had just freaking ripped that Band-Aid off and put them all out all at once, maybe we do an index style, I actually think the game would have been really cool. But because there are other factions in the game, you can't just have one faction just cleaning up after everybody, because it sucks. So it is what it is. Anyway, so the one thing I do want to say about Tau, we did talk about a little bit of Tau last weekend, and we talked about some interesting different builds between Farsight Enclaves and Tau Sept. This week, we have less exciting sub-faction sort of archetype variants to talk about, because I think one variant has won out over all the other ones, and that is the old Tau Sept has been killing it. Stephen Burton would personally prefer a balance up rather than a balance down. Yeah, I think the problem with that is that it's much harder to do, because in order to make datasheets more powerful, in some instances, without breaking them from like sort of just a numerical standpoint, you have to change them mechanically. So, for example, if you take like, what's a good example? Like a Lehman Russ battle tank, right? Like just a regular old Lehman Russ. And actually, I'm sure we can just like pull up its data sheet right now. Lehman Russ. Or even better, like a super heavy. How about a Bane Blade? How about we look at a Bane Blade? So here's a Bane Blade, right? This data sheet, because of its interaction with the metagame and the core mechanics of 40k, is basically worthless, right? It doesn't have appreciable resilience. It has T8, which is fine, but at this stage of the game, not great. Like we have armies that are permanently transhuman, and we have friggin' Maliceptors are a thing now. It's like T8 with a 4+ invulnerable save for 1/3 the point cost. Just about, I guess, like the 40% the point cost. It's above 18 wounds, so it can't be obscured, which means it can get alpha struck. Its ballistic skill sucks and degrades, right? So if we're talking about this system, which GW currently uses, where they make no mechanical changes, they only make changes to the points cost of things to rebalance them, this is sort of a lost cause, because there's very little you can do to make a Bane Blade useful right now. Especially since, like, in a lot of situations, it can't even move on tables. If you're playing like player plays terrain, this is just another discussion we were having today in the Discord. !Discord in the chat, by the way, if you're not in there, come and hang out. Was if you don't have player plays terrain rules that restrict movement blocking, you can have situations where Bane Blades like just literally can't maneuver on the table, and that sucks. And that's just like mechanical deficiencies with how the unit works. And if you make it cheaper, unless you make it unreasonably cheap, like if a Bane Blade was 100 points, you would play it probably. But if you cut its points cost down to with a reasonable like a reasonable amount, it's basically not going to make this unit playable. And that is a big problem with how 40k is designed for the most part, because there are these large swaths of units that just literally from a core rule standpoint basically can't be played and can't be rebalanced until those core rules change. And that's very sad. Tyranids were balanced up with their supplement earlier this year. It was pretty easy to do. Right. So that's if we are... So that's what I mean, right? The Leviathan supplement. Well, they got two, but it took two supplements. It took Leviathan and the Army of Renown. And especially, I think it was more so the Army of Renown, but maybe the interaction between the two. But they basically had to mechanically change the entire faction, right, in order to balance it up. And that's not like GW doesn't just do that, right? What they go through and do is they points change things. So you can, if we're talking from a standpoint of what is feasible to do, which is that they're going to release a new points data sheet and change everything's points, you can't really change the points of a lot of things to make them better, because there are units that without literally rewriting their entire data sheet are not really going to see play. Baneblades at 250 points. Let's do it, boys! Turning radius calculations that require a supercomputer? Hell yeah, dude. Yeah. Who wants to move the las cannon turret on a Baneblade and then pay movement for it? That stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. So I think if we... I do think that, there is a potential that the game could be balanced up if you were to go through and re-release every single codex. But I don't know how much that is balanced, like rebalancing, as much as it is just reworking. But what the design team does is they just change points values in the points value, the Munitorum Field Manual, and I don't think that there's a limit to the effect that can have without just breaking things. Eventually, you get to the point where your data sheets are too cheap, and then you just spam the same data sheet over and over again, and that's not balanced. That's just in expense, I guess. Is there a estimate of when there will be a new data slate or something changing the points? Yeah, so it comes out alongside the chapter approved. So it will be on the 25th. There will be the new data slate, or depending on how they work things. Anyway, let's talk about Tau, chat. We went on a little bit of a tangent there. So like I said before, the one thing that we can see sort of pretty consistently here is that basically almost all of these Tau lists have moved to entirely Tau Sept, and they're kind of very similar builds. The archetype ends up looking very similar. S tier Necrons after points reveal? Dude, I hope so. Necron players have been beleaguered for long enough. They need something. We gotta take the Necron community off Suicide Watch, so we need some buffs. So this one in particular, it is a Patrol plus Vanguard, and we also have Shadow Sun there in her Supreme Command's attachment. We have the two individual broadside battle suits. These guys, we're rocking twin plasma rifles now instead of the smart missile systems, which I kind of like. Although it makes your reroll less efficient, but I think you're mostly just doing it for like the points value. And it does mean that for 85 points, like the amount of damage that one broadside puts out just in with direct fire shooting is kind of insane. Because it's the 2 3 damage plasma rifle shots and the 2 D3 plus 3, really realistically D3 plus 4 damage because it has the extra mortal wound on top, rail rifle shots. Interestingly, it has a multi-tracker. I wonder what that's about. Is that maybe that's a nod to like 9-man Leviathan bricks? Does a multi-tracker trigger off? How do I not know this? Does it trigger off 11 models or 6 models? I'm gonna double check before we talk about it too much. Because normally you would see like a stereo gyroscopes, or you would see target lock. generally speaking. 6 or more models. Yeah, so I bet that is a concession to Tyranids, because being able to explode 6s on the rail rifle shots is kind of a huge deal. So that's kind of sick. All right, I'll buy that. Mr. Tom Ogden, I appreciate it. We also have Long Strike in this detachment. When you do Crisis Bodyguards, and then we move on to the second detachment, and we get the 3 Crisis Battlesuit bricks. So generally speaking, almost all of these Tau set lists are based on the big Crisis Battlesuit bricks. Multi-tracker is there because the good upgrades are ineligible when you take Twin Plasma. Oh, really? Does it like cut off the other things? Shows how much I know about broadside battlesuits, I guess. You'd think after having seen them for so long, I would know too much. So you can have up to 2 of the following. Duplicates are not allowed. 1 twin plasma. And then... Okay, yeah, I see. There's a restriction. You cannot be equipped with more than 1 of early warning, stabilized optics, twin plasma, or velocity tracker. That's weird. What a bizarre restriction. Is that because there's a modeling restriction on that? Like the twin plasma rifle like takes up the slot where you would put like a thing? Do those have, I guess like they don't want you to maybe the combo like velocity tracker plasma rifle? But like stabilized optics plasma rifle has there's no overlap, right? Because it's an assault weapon. That's wild. That's super weird, chat. I never knew that. How did I not know that? Well, you learn something new every day. And today we learned that the broadside battlesuit like war gear datasheet selection is fucking bizarre. Oh my god, dude. Weird. Well, I'm sure it helps in shooting at Leviathan Tyranid warrior units, even though you're sort of pigeonholed into taking it. This one has Precision of the Hunter, Cold Star Commander. It does have Onager Gauntlet on that guy. No thermoneutronic projector, so just the one melee weapon. Not both melee weapons. The thermoneutronic projector is the 2 damage flamer that you can punch with in melee, which is pretty sweet. Yeah, that's super annoying, chap. Thanks for the shout out though. That's a that's a good point, I guess. And I guess it's the twin plasma rifle is 5 points. Or the 10 points, excuse me. So you save 5 points off taking SMS, and the SMS is sad right now because of the indirect fire rule. I guess the other thing you could take is like high yield missiles. Oh no, but that's instead of your railgun. Just kidding, that's stupid. Don't do that. Well, I love that the high yield missiles are more expensive than the heavy rail rifle. Like, I guess they shoot 8 times, right? So it's like, when you think about it, you're like, oh, 8 shots versus 2 shots, much higher. No, that's not how that works at all. Buff broadside battlesuits, GW. Make the high yield missile system a 0 point upgrade. Make it the same. Yeah, dude, Flame Punch. It's a, I'm sure we can find the particular rules over here, but it is a D6 plus 2 because it's a Tau Flamer that punches in melee for Strength 4 AP2, which Strength 4 isn't that great, but the attacks are in addition to your normal attacks. So if you take it alongside Onager Gauntlet, you get your 4 base attacks with the Onager Gauntlet, which is Strength 10, 3 damage. And then you also get D6 plus 2 additional attacks with the thermoneutronic projector. And if you really want to, you could leave Onager Gauntlet at home, and you could just make your normal attacks with the thermoneutronic projector as well. So you make D6 plus 4 attacks. Then, on top of that, all of those are full rerolling because you have Precision of the Hunter. So you kind of make like a ridiculous number of attacks with this thing. Now, interestingly, it doesn't actually have the Flamer rule, so it doesn't automatically hit, which I think conceptually is because it's like it probably shoots like a fireball instead of like a flamethrower thing, but I have no idea. But you are hitting on 2s rerolling because you're a Cold Star commander, so it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, this weapon is really good. Not good enough to take in this list. I think the downside is that it costs quite a bit. The upgrade itself, I think, is 20 points. Yeah, it's 20, and I believe you also have to buy the Flamer, which is 5 points, and it takes the spot of another weapon. So if you're trying to play this longer ranged game, which it looks like we're trying to do here with this Cold Star build, because he has the DWO2 burst cannon plus a high output plus a missile pod, so he's firing mostly at 18 inches. He doesn't necessarily like want to be getting stuck up in there. He could cup the shield generator for it, but then that guy's really easy to kill, so it is what it is. This also keeps him cheaper at 160 points. It's actually one of the cheaper commander builds, which is pretty nice. And then we have an Ethereal with the Humble Stave. I know that some people were saying that maybe they keep you leave the Humble Stave at home after the points, the CP changes. But man, that feels so tough to me. I think it's going to be interesting in the new GT packet, trying to build all this stuff into a Tau list, because you might end up with just a single detachment. You may just take like Shadow Sun plus 2 detachments in a Farsight Enclaves list, and then or two commanders, excuse me, in a Farsight Enclaves list, and call it a day, because it'd be so tough to fit the rest in. Yeah, Stevie J. That's good stuff. So we also had some other Tau Empire from Atlantic City. We did have, this is another Tau Sept lift from Brenton Weiss, and it's mostly, I think, basically the exact same list. It looks a little bit different. We have 2 Crisis Bodyguard units, I think, instead of Long Strike. Is that right? No, we still have Long Strike. So we cut some stuff for another Crisis Bodyguard, but for the most part are exactly the same. We have the same Crisis Battlesuit teams, mostly Fusion Plasma to get through Armor of Contempt, which is what we had in Tom's list, right? Yeah. Because one problem that a lot of these Tau lists were facing was that if you were taking a lot of the AP1 stuff, we saw some missile pods getting played, we saw, air bursting fragmentation projectors, all that stuff, it would have a hell of a time getting through Space Marines. And especially, armies like Grey Knights and stuff, where and Blood Angels, where you use Armor of Contempt on already high armor save units, and also you're not playing regular Space Marines, so you have a much better chance of doing well. That actually tilts that matchup a little bit and makes it much harder for the Tau player. So you just take these plasma rifles, which are huge AP4, I believe, on those things, and you don't worry about it so much. Plus, they're 3 damage, so they shoot through a lot of Tyranid stuff. They shoot through Terminators. All that stuff just gets killed by the plasma rifle shot, so pretty good. So that was Atlantic City Open, but we also saw these other 2 events dominated by Tau. We had US Open San Diego, which is Matthew Geyer playing basically a very similar build. So Tau Sept, we had one Cold Star Commander, excuse me, with this one with Vectored Maneuvering Thrusters. So that's the Tau Sept Relic to move in response to a charge. Now, interestingly, it is kind of messed up if you take drones with it, because only the bearer with the relic gets to move. So you basically get to move within your own coherency, and then you call it a day. But it can mean that you, at the very least, if the commander's the farthest forward most model, you're probably putting at least 4 or 5 inches in addition to that charge. So they're probably failing the charge, if that's the only model that they can target with it. So that's still a super good relic, especially on a more aggressive Cold Star Commander build. Then we have Long Strike, a bunch of Crisis Battlesuits. Yeah, it looks like triple Crisis Battlesuits with basically the same loadouts. These ones running burst cannons and plasma rifles, and then Shadow Sun as well. So it is a little bit unfortunate that it feels like we saw some really interesting Tau sub-factions previously, but they are all kind of standardizing around the same build, which is that Tau Sept build with the triple Crisis Battlesuit bricks. I was enjoying talking about some of the other, like the alternative lists. What we saw some alternative sub-factions, we saw some custom Sept, and we saw some Hammerhead play getting seen just outside of just taking Long Strike. But it looks like that's falling a little bit by the wayside now as people are just focusing on these big Crisis teams. So it may be that we see a crisis team hit in the not too distant future to in an effort to tone down the faction. I'm not sure. We'll find out, I guess. We have now this is the one. This is third place from U.S. Open San Diego, and this is the one different sub-faction that we'll talk about today, because we do have a Farside Enclaves build here. So we do get double commanders in our detachments. As I learned last week, it's not unlimited commanders, it's just 2 instead of 1. So that's good. We do have an exemplar of the Kauyan on an Enforcer Battlesuit commander, so he can make the Crisis Battlesuit's objective secured, which is pretty freaking sweet. But we also saw, I think, some play with Know Your Role. Is that the correct... No, I don't remember what it's called, what the sub-faction ability is called. But it gives or play their part, excuse me, which gives you objective secured when they charge. Is that right? Oh no, maybe it's a different one. There's a sub-faction ability that gives you objective secured though. And that one's also pretty good. Or maybe it was just counting them as 3 models and then giving them objective secured to hold objectives. No, there's another one that definitely gives you objective secured. Oh. Yeah, blocking tactics. When you make a charge move, you have objective secured. If you already have objective secured, you count as double. So if you take both these together, in Sector A and Sector B, which you count as 3 models with OBSEC when you charge a model. And because Tau are weird, their Fire and Fade doesn't preclude you from charging. So a super sweet combo you can do is take a big Crisis Battlesuit team, walk them up with their opponent, shoot, move 6 inches with Strike and Fade, move 6 inches forward rather than backward, then declare a charge and steal their objective away, which is pretty sweet. That's very cool. All right. Anyway, so we're talking about the Farside Enclaves. This one does not have that, but it does have the Enforcer Commander in order to give the Crisis teams OBSEC, which is nice. We do see some Cyclic Ion Blasters coming back in. That's nice. It is nice to when you... The Cyclic Ion Blaster, I think, was another weapon that was hit pretty hard by the Armor of Contempt change, especially because it came in concert with the Monk COD change. So they basically lost 2 pips of AP against a lot of targets. And AP2 shooting at a Space Marine in cover basically becomes AP0, which means they don't do a ton of damage. Although against a lot of Tyrannid stuff, Cyclic Ion Blasters are pretty cool, because you rarely need more than AP2 against Tyrannids. And Eldar, I guess. Plus they're a good strength value against Eldar anyway. So yeah, I don't hate the Cyclic Ion Blasters in there. We do have 1 Hammerhead gunship seeing play. We do get the pseudo full rerolls in Farside Enclaves, because you get the targeting array reroll for being a Hammerhead, and then you get a floating wound reroll for Farside Enclaves. So you can full reroll the railgun shot on the Hammerhead, which is basically like the septs that you want to play Hammerheads in are the ones where you can source that second reroll. So it's Tau Sept and Farside Enclaves, and consequently that's where you see most of them. We do see Commander Farsight coming in here. He is the Warlord, so he does have Exemplar of the Montcot as well, so we have an access to a full reroll there on one of the Crisis Battlesuit teams. Then we have a Cold Star with... This one is bringing Thermoneutronic Projector. Hey, there it is! The Punch Flamer! Go get him! Bonk, bonk. If there's a sub-faction called Know Your Role, there should be another one called Shut Your Mouth. Lyle, that's kinky. Oh boy. So this guy does have he does not have Onager Gauntlet. Instead, he has Solid Image Projection, which is an invulnerable save, and you ignore the first failed saving throw each turn, I believe. So that guy becomes very difficult to kill. He's got his 4 base attacks plus the Thermoneutronic Projector attack, so he's 6 plus D6, Strength 4, AP2, 2 damage attacks, with full rerolls in melee, and he can basically just stand in melee for a while because he's so difficult to remove. Especially since you also have Save Your Protocols if there's nearby drones on top of that. So you can basically fail 2 saving throws before any damage hits him with the solid image projection. He's everywhere. Which one's the real one? There's so many solid images being projected. Whoa. Can I do a video on differences in terrain layouts between event types? Yeah, maybe. That might be an interesting video. I might do. I know I've done lots of video discussion for advanced tactics. So if you are a channel member or a patron, you can see those and you can check those out. I talked about US Open quite a bit. The US Open layouts, which this did use. But that might be another interesting video. Diaconus. I like that. That's pretty good, especially if you're new. It would be a little bit awkward. What website is this? This is discountgamesinc.com/tournaments. I'll just throw it in the chat for everybody. This basically aggregates all like top fives, basically from recent events. Usually they update every Monday from the past event. Now, I did say I was going to get on my soapbox a little bit about the U.S. Open, and I will do that a little bit here because, well, I think there are certainly some. There's definitely some sort of there's a reason that probably especially in the United States, the overall pool of players outside of these two events is probably a little bit softer, because these are the two largest events almost of the year, ACO and US Open. There's only a couple US Open events every year, and ACO is basically trying to rival like Bay Area Open, but on the East Coast rather than the West Coast. So having these two events together on the same weekend meant that they were going to pull a lot of players from elsewhere, which meant that these were probably the two hardest metagames, I think, in at least in the United States for the past weekend. So I think there was probably a if these look like they're definitely the toughest top 5 and top 8 respectively, that would be why. That said, I think if we let me see if I can pull up. Actually, I wonder if I can find it on Best Coast Pairings. If we pull up the top cut for the highest ranking pod in the U.S. Open San Diego, I imagine that it looks a lot like this. And I think that beyond just being factions that are doing well, the U.S. Open format sort of... Hey, I found it. Okay, so I don't know if this records top cut. I think it does, so let's find out. So we have Tau, Tyranids, Eldar, Tyranids, Eldar. We got one Blood Angels. So I think top 16, we had literally 2 not Eldar Tower Tyranids. 1 Blood Angels, 1 Imperial Knights. Is that right? Oh, no. And then 1 Chaos Knights, so 3. And I hope that this is based on their top cut, because I have to imagine that the highest percentage to win that the most powerful factions are going to give you is going to be at the beginning of the event, right? Because you have the highest chance of getting paired with another faction that is not as powerful as yours, which means that once you hit the top the pod stage, you actually are it looks like you have the highest chance of getting paired with a bunch of people who are also at the same level as you. And I think that a result like this, where the top X players are basically all playing the same 2 or maybe 3 factions, is going to be representative of a situation like that. Whereas an event that doesn't cut before the end looks a lot more dynamic. So we can see, like, we have all of these other GTs, right, where we have 4 or 5 different factions in the top 5, and that's not the case with San Diego. Now, for those who don't know, the format of the US Open system is that they will play 8 total rounds, I believe it is, over the course of 3 days. You play the first 4 rounds, and that determines your placement overall in the event. Then they break you into pods of 16, and your next 4 games are only among the same 16 people. So after round 4, your placement in the final rankings is locked to those 16. So if you're in the top 16 after round 4, you are locked to be top 16. But if you are, you're 3-1 or whatever, and your tiebreakers aren't that good, and you're top 48, you cannot progress past top 48. So when you're at the most open stage of pairings, which is going to be the first couple of games where you can play with literally anybody, and your chances of getting a softer pairing are much higher, these factions that have a higher general win percentage and they have a higher power level are going to be doing better, and their tiebreaks are going to be better, and their chance to win is going to be higher, which means that you're basically always locked into having your top 16 look like that. Now, that's not usually how the top placings of an event typically look, because those factions will knock each other out or get paired against stuff that silver bullets them. And in a US Open style of event, the chances of that happening are wildly lower, because it's so much harder to get to an undefeated level after round 4. And I don't like that. So I know it's also very demoralizing as a player, because as soon as you lose a game in a US Open style event, you have no chance at making top 16. You physically cannot do it, because they're going to cut 2 undefeated players. You're not undefeated, so you cannot progress up. And it's kind of, I can only speak for myself, but it's sort of insulting that they would be like, oh, do you want to keep playing anyway, despite the fact that you have no chance at improving your ranking at all. You're locked into that 16th place space there. And I think that this look right here, where it's just a bunch of the same faction, is sort of emblematic of that problem. And I think there are so many problems that get created by that pairing, or by that placing style. It's flabbergasting to me that they continue to use it. It's very frustrating. Is there a time limit? Yeah, generally speaking, it depends on the event, but I mean, almost every game will have 2.5 or 3 hours for each game. Some events will require chess clocks get used. Some events will just have a round timer, but yeah, there's always a time limit on that stuff. It sounds like they had milestone announcements. So usually they'll get on a loudspeaker and tell you like where you should be each game. So they have a breakdown of like the first battle round should take 20 minutes. The second battle round should take 40 minutes. The third battle round should take 20 minutes. And then they get to the point where you run out of time. For example, the understanding is that the justification for the pod system is to make better games for the majority of players, even though it makes for less interesting top tables. Yeah, they have there's a lot of justifications for it, but I think they're mostly BS. The other thing that they do is they break down, they do it to like striate prize support. So even if you've lost at the beginning of the event, you can still get an award for winning your pod, which, I don't know, is like kind of a consolation prize, I guess. Like, here you go, king of the losers, But I don't. I guess it's a system that isn't designed for me, I guess. So it is what it is. I just think that from a competitive standpoint, it's very silly. Nova Open used the same system, which is why US Open uses it, because Mike Brandt, who is the Nova Open organizer, is also on the organized play team. So he implements a lot of systems from his experience with Nova Open, and I played it at one time at Nova Open, and I was not a fan. I didn't like the idea that after having lost a game, especially in 40k, which is a game that's can be decided on a coin flip a lot of times, especially against armies that are of similar power level. If that coin flip goes against you, there's nothing you can do to recuperate your loss. You're just boned, and that's crushing. It's very frustrating, and I would rather them just cut to top 16 and then have another tournament for everyone else, which I think would be probably healthier, generally speaking. Anybody who plays 40k tournaments for prizes, they want trophies. Well, trophy is a prize, right? And they give you like a little certificate. It's like, you're a pod winner. You did it. Yay. Good stuff. They use it because it has a chance of allowing the widest variety of factions to the top 16. It doesn't, though, right? I guess. That can't be the actual rationale, though. Because that's not really how the game works. I don't know. Just instead of like making up really convoluted pairing systems for your competitive play, just balance your game, and then your final placements will look better. If everyone wants trophies, why do so many people show up with non-meta armies? Because, well, first off, ITC has awards, speaking of trophies, for best in faction. So showing up with non-meta armies is a way to get another trophy, and a lot of events will do that. They will give you a best in faction. And I do think that is and I don't know if US Open does that, but I do think that that's a much healthier way to like reward playing a more diverse spread of armies than we had this weird top 16 cut stuff. And maybe you could, because of the size of the event, like maybe you could prize it down or something. I have no idea, but also people just like the armies that they like. I don't know. I would probably were I to play a GT, I would probably play Tyranids almost regardless of the metagame because I like Tyranids a lot. It's my thing. Even if they're bad, I'll probably play them and I'll just be salty about it at the end that I played a bad army, but I'll still play them. So we also saw another Tau win over here at Terracon. I do want to give a shout out to Adam Camilleri, absolute legend. Down under, playing some friggin' Dark Angels, dude. Going 5-1, which is pretty good. And this list is wild. It's a Raven Wing list. I guess it's a hybrid list. It has a Raven Wing detachment and a Deathwing detachment. So we do have the big bricks of Deathwing Terminators. We have a Relic Terminator squad, which are just there because they're pretty good at shooting for their price, and they're one of the most efficient ways to get 2+ save Armor of Contempt on the table, especially alongside the Deathwing bonus of being transhuman all the time, which is pretty good. You have a Raven and Apothecary to heal those guys, plus a big Deathwing Terminator squad with melee weapons. Pretty good stuff. But then the Raven Wing detachment is the wild part. These do give you objective secured for your bikers, so your bike squads are OBSEC. But then he has 2 Dark Talons and 3 Stormspeeder Thunder Strikes. So, sick! I'm going to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what is going on with this list, but clearly it works out pretty well. And I do think that it shores up a lot the issue that Deathwing typically has, which is that they are slow as balls. So they're just standing there. They just move 5 inches and hope for the best. But if you just take what is it? Indomitable Will, the secondary objective where you hold an objective forever, and you camp maybe like a Deathwing Terminator squad on it to hold it for ages and ages. Then you can play more aggressively with the bikers. You can trade bike squads for center objectives, and you can use like the Storm Speeders to give you some mobility alongside the Dark Talons, so that you're not just trying to run Terminators at people, and you actually like present a multi-threat approach. This feels like a very finesse Dark Angels army, which I absolutely love. So big shout out to Adam Camilleri for going way off the deep end with this list. This list is pretty sick, actually. Good stuff. But we also want to talk about the list that won, which is Adam Napier. Again, Tau Sept, Tau Empire list. We do have a Humble Staff Ethereal in this one. Cold Star Battlesuit, basically the same stuff. This one is bringing solid image projection with its Precision of the Hunter, but no melee weapon on that one. Long Strike, a bunch of recruits and stuff. The 3 big bricks of Crisis battle suits. These ones also taking Cyclic Ion and actually missile pods. So this list feels a little bit kind of a Tau list of yesteryear almost, as well as 1 individual broadside battle suit, 1 Devilfish, and Shady Lady. We've seen some Crude Hounds in that one too. Crude Hounds are so badass, by the way. It's like Cyber Wolves 2.0 essentially. But yeah, so those are essentially the largest events of the weekend, right? All 3 of which were won by Tau Empire. So Tau clearly making a big comeback here. We did see, obviously, a lot of Tyranids, a lot of Eldari taking the stage. But the remainder of the weekend was relatively well, what's the word? Represented between different factions, because we saw a lot of super interesting and diverse lists getting played. So let's talk about those. We did have a couple smaller events. These were not quite GTC size, which is why we didn't go top 5 for those. But we did have Bembel Clash, which is, I believe, 50 people, and came down to a tie. Or maybe it was 28. Maybe it was a 28 player event. I guess I can just look it up. We have the power to look up events, chat. I don't know if you knew this, but it's pretty cool. If the Wheel of Death will eventually stop spinning. Oh, Stevie, giving Diego a trophy in chat? That's nice. Very cute. Well, this has been a disaster. All right, much better. How many players? 33 players. All right, so pretty big, but enough to go down to a single undefeated. And instead, we got to draw a 57-point draw in the final round. So I don't know what the story about that is. 57 is relatively low scoring, especially for these two players who had really high results. Zach Martin did have some low-scoring wins in there, but Florian Schmidt with all 90s. Hot damn, dude. That's crazy. But yeah, it came down to a tie in the finals. We'll talk about the list though, because both of them are a little bit off the wall here. We had Tyranids and 2 Azuriania lists in top 5, but none of them got to the final round. So get absolutely wrecked. Now this is one thing I was talking to some people in the Discord earlier today, and one thing that we have been kind of shocked about in the meta right now is how little play Iron Hands are seeing, because they're kind of being heralded as one of the worst Space Marine factions because their win rate is very low currently, and that's surprising to me because their matchup into the metagame at large is actually pretty good. I wouldn't say that they're like advantaged, but they have good profiles at fighting Eldar. They have good profiles at fighting Tyranids. They're not too bad against other Space Marine chapters. And I think it's just surprising to me, I guess, that they're not seeing more play. And I think if we were to see them see more play, it would be a list like this. And I might actually do a list tech video on this list in particular. Although I kind of already have, because this is basically a Fushini slash. So if you saw my list tech about Fushini's Iron Hands list, this is the same idea. It does have a Calexis Assassin, which is pretty cool. So we do have some anti-psyker going on in there. We have an Armor Indomitus Lieutenant with Rights of War. Good stuff. Love it. Jump Pack and Combi Melta. Sick. And we are playing this is sort of the classic build, or I guess this one's a little bit different because it is Master Artisans. So Whirlwind of Rage gives it exploding 6s on the first turn of melee, so it's effectively +1 to hit. But the cool thing about Iron Hands is that they also have All Mercy is Weakness, which is a stratagem that you target an enemy unit when your unit attacks. All your attacks have to target that enemy unit, but your wounds also explode. So in this case, if you're going into melee, let's say, for example, with one of these Vanguard veteran squads, so you have 4 Lightning Claws and a Thunderhammer, so 16 Lightning Claw attacks, plus a bunch of Chainsword attacks and a Thunderhammer. you're now exploding your 6s to hit. Then you're full rerolling into an exploding 6 to wound, which means you should hit out of just, let's say, just the lightning claw attacks. You have 16 lightning claw attacks. You should hit probably 13 of them. Then you're full rerolling into an exploding explosion to wound, which means you're probably wounding if you're wounding, even if you're wounding on 5s, you probably wound 5, rerolling another 3 or so, and then you have 21 total chances to roll 6s, so you probably get 3 additional wounds on the 6s. So you're probably wounding like 11 times, so you almost full convert your lightning claw attacks, which is like pretty wild when you think about it, especially if you're an assault doctrine and they're AP3, and that's before your chain swords and your thunderhammer swing. So even with just the combination of those two abilities, those guys hit like absolute Mack trucks. So that's pretty cool. We also have Master Artisans in there, so that is probably the reason that we're taking the individual Thunderhammers on the Sergeants, because we do have a floating reroll for them. So they're exploding 6s and have a reroll. Plus, we can spam multi-meltas elsewhere. So we have a Land Speeder with a multi-melta. We have individual multi-meltas in our Devastator squads. We have Bolt Sniper Rifle Eliminators with a Bolt Carbine, so they can move twice. Do we have any more like random multi-melta shots? But we do have the Cyclone Missile Launcher on the Relic Contemptor too, which also helps. So a lot of times you see Born Heroes in that slot, so they're +1 to hit on the charge, so that those Vanguard Veteran squads push even farther, more efficient, but not today, I guess. We are taking the rights of the Master Artisans. And to be fair, the Master Artisans also affects you in shooting, whereas the Born Heroes only gives you the buff in melee. And the reroll can also be used in melee. So it's not like you're just trading a little bit of efficiency in melee for a little bit of efficiency in shooting, which I think is a fine trade-off. So yeah, moving down the list, we have 2 Infiltrator squads, 1 Incursor squad, but then the real hero of the chapter here literally is the Relic Contemptor Dreadnought with March of the Ancients. So this is sort of the classic combo that makes Iron Hands really good, and I think one of the reasons, in addition to that, like exploding wound stratagem, one of the reasons that they're so strong. It's kind of they have kind of a 3-pronged approach to being strong, and this is one of the big legs of the Iron Hands tripod is this guy. So he, with Hero of the Chapter for 1 CP, he gets Merciless Logic, which is an additional attack on hit rolls of 6. So it's not an explosion. You roll the attack again, which is a little bit worse, but you can then re-roll it if you have re-roll effects, so it's not too bad. And generally speaking, I think we have a Tech Marine in this list. Yeah, we have a Tech Marine with Target Protocols. So we can give that guy +1 to hit, so he's hitting on 2s. Target Protocols is it's an old school Master Artisan, so it's a hit, wound, and damage roll, re-roll. And you have a Master Artisan's re-roll. Plus, if you want to as well, you can Wisdom of the Ancients, the Relic Contemptor Dreadnought. So he can reroll all his 1s to hit, is hitting on 2s, and exploding his 6s. Then you can All Mercy his weakness him, so his wounds also explode, and he has 2 Twin Volkite Culverins. So he's firing 2 Missile Launcher shots that explode hits and wounds, and 16 Volkite shots that explode hits and wounds. So and I guess you can also you can put him into a Devastator Doctrine to trigger his Super Doctrine, which will also give him reroll 1s to hit on top, and an AP. So that's actually what you typically do. You don't usually Wisdom him, but you can Wisdom him for the Lieutenant aura if your Lieutenant has left. So he goes like absolutely ham once all that stuff is online. It is only EP1, but it is going to inflict a bunch of mortal wounds on top because of the Volkite rule, and on top of that, he's really good against the low armor save factions that aren't Space Marines and stuff. He still has a Cyclone Missile Launcher that you can put into Devastator Doctrine, so it's still AP3, and he's AP1 on the little guns, plus dealing mortal wounds. So he's not like useless against heavily armored stuff, but if you're fighting Tyranids and if you're fighting Eldar, the 2 factions that we just talked about being really strong, and even if you're fighting Tau, and almost especially if you're fighting Tau, because he forces a lot of interesting questions onto a Tau player of where they allocate their saving throws. Because if they have a bunch of gun drones, you can fire your Volkite Culverins. If they take the saves on the gun drones, your low AP means nothing because the gun drones are just saving on a 4+ invulnerable save anyway. But that means that you can basically wipe all their gun drones really easily. if you take a save on a suit, however, when you follow up with your cyclone missile launcher, you probably just ace that suit out right there. So sequencing your attacks is like a really interesting question mark with the Relic Contemptors. But especially against the low armor save stuff like Tyranids and Eldar, this dude just picks up whatever he shoots at almost perfectly. The one awkward part is if he shoots at like warriors and they -1 damage him, they're probably transhuman if they're Leviathan, so he's winning on 4s and then only dealing 1 damage with the Volkites. But he still kills, if his explosions go well, he still kills on average like 5 Tyranid warriors. He does absolutely massive damage. And then the other part of the Wombo combo, so that we have pretty strong Vanguard veteran squads. With their double explosions, we have a pretty good Relic Contemptor here that does massive damage. And then the last Wombo combo is the Devastator squads, which can pop out of the drop pod on turn 1. And because of the Iron Hand Super Doctrine, they hit or they ignore their move and shoot penalty with their heavy weapons and reroll all their ones to hit. Plus, you have a Master Artisan's reroll floating. And they just shoot super duper hard. So if you can't hide your entire army from a drop pod, which is highly unlikely, then they come in and they just kill, just pick a thing and it probably dies. And those are all the reasons that Iron Hands are great, and that's why Florian took first place in this event. And that is what I have to say about that. That was a lot of discussion about Iron Hands. We also see this Ynnari list here. Now, I will be, to be honest, chat, I know very little about Ynnari. Outside of the fact that they use a lot of Craft World stuff. So we have Harlequin troops. We have a Kurnos bow, Farseer Skyrunner with Mark of the Incomparable Hunter. So that combo is still live, it looks like. That's pretty good. But then we also get a Shadow Seer with Laughing God's Eye to give the Harlequins a 5+ against mortal wounds. We took an Incarn, bunch of Rangers, bunch of Harlequin troopers, Fire Dragons, Swooping Hawks, probably just to be a to the last target. Who are to the last in this list? The Swooping Hawks, the Fire Dragons, and the Incarn. The Incarn is so mobile, oftentimes they're very difficult to pin down. So I'm not surprised at that whatsoever. So it looks like we're mostly playing it to the last game, and then we can... and I imagine the Fire Dragons hide in this Wave Serpentile game until they have to come out and blow something up, and then they hide. And then we just play primary objective control with the Harlequin troops. So that seems fine. This feels like a mixed Eldari list, which it literally is. It feels like a mixed Eldari list, but we didn't have to pay the CP for the Harlequin detachment, which is why we're in Ynnari. So I guess you unlock the Incarn, which is nice. But it feels like, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like we just didn't want to take a traveling player troop or a traveling player detachment, and so we ended up in Ynnari. But that's good because Ynnari have been doing not very good, I think, recently. But that might mostly be because pure Harlequins and Hail of Doom Eldari is sort of silly good. And then let's see, let's talk about some other interesting lists. So we saw some other GTs here, won by normal stuff. I do want to give a shout out to Scott Rumpel, who I probably owe a video about his Space Wolves list. And it's good that he went 5-1 at War Games for Warriors because it gives me another excuse to do one. So hopefully I can squeak some time out of my day, chat, to make some targeted videos on these lists because this is a good old triple Wolfen, triple Wolfguard, triple Cyber Wolves. We got a big long Fang squad. This is a good old punchy Space Wolves list, and I love it. So that's pretty solid, but we did see Tyranids and Eldari take down some events. We did see Branson Brock get won by Imperial Knights, which is very cool. Playing House Tyrannus with an Errant Paladin, Crusader, and 4 Warglaves, double Armiger, or 4 Halverins, excuse me, double... or 4 Armigers, double Helverin, double Warglaves. Interesting stuff. But then I think the other list that we probably want to talk about is Sam Procopio, who I did commentate at Motor City Mayhem and was an absolutely just like rock solid Blood Angels player. Super good fundamentals on he was able to do, which was sweet. We have a Voidsman at Arms unit to hold objectives. Just basically 5 Imperial Guardsmen for 48 points, or 6 Imperial Guardsmen, excuse me, for 48 points. Pretty good. And the officer has a cool shotgun, which is pretty sweet. I think it's 2 damage, actually, which is awesome. So bringing so I think this list is basically the same as what he played previously, and it looks like it is maybe a little bit different. I don't remember if he had the Eliminator Squad when we have talked about him in the past, but it does have a Librarian with Null Zone, which is pretty nice, a Sanguinary Priest with Teeth of Terra. So he's got the +3 attacks, 2 damage apiece, and then we have the pièce de résistance there is a Chapter Master with Visage of Death, so he's -1 to be hit and turns off objective secured within 3 inches. Then he also himself has Rights of War, so he gives his own stuff objective secured, and he gives himself objective secured. So if he can hit every obsec model on an objective, he automatically takes the objective away, which is pretty cool. Especially since he does bring Soul Warden as well, so he's going to be buried in the middle of the Sanguinary Guard units to give them a 5+ against mortal wounds. And on top of that, he gives them rerolls because he's the Warlord. And Sanguinary Guard get rerolls when they're near their Warlord. We also have 2 Incursor Squads, 1 Intercessor Squad, 1 unit of Death Company, so we have access to a Forlorn Fury if we really want it. You can sort of put those guys in an aggressive position. It forces your opponent to deploy defensively to worry about them, and then if you go first, you get to move them, and then with the pregame move from Forlorn Fury, and then move them again, and then charge, and they get to blow something up, which is pretty fun. We also then have 3 Sanguinary Guard Squads, as well as a Scout Squad. Looks like mostly axes and swords. People have been moving towards the swords recently to fight against Armor of Contempt because it has an extra AP, but the axes are +1 strength, which gets them to strength 5, which is pretty nice. But generally speaking, I think with the number of attacks that Sanguinary Guard have, or it brings them to strength 6, excuse me. I think it's +2 strength versus +1 strength on the sword, but the sword is an extra point of AP. But strength 5 with +1 to wound because they're Blood Angels is usually fine, I think, is what people have been finding. But it looks like we have stricken a chord between almost 50-50 between the two. But then I think the other interesting pieces of tech here are some more tech pieces. We have a single Eradicator Squad with heavy melter rifles and a multi-melta, mostly just to act as a sort of a counterpunch. I think their heavy weapons are offset a little bit by the fact that they're probably going to be within range of the Chapter Master, so you can get them full rerolls the turn that they want to commit in and double tap something to death. And then we have the Eliminator Squad with an Instigator Bolt Carbine, so they can double move if you need them. And they're 3 models, so if you need them to get engaged in all fronts or just move up the table or screen for any sort of secondary, they have, or even just moving into the center objective for a primary. They're relatively mobile for that. And then we also have the Landspeeder Storm with a Scout Squad inside it. The Landspeeder Storm has assault transport, so the Scout Squad can disembark after the transport moves, which means their range on performing secondary or performing actions is absolutely phenomenal because the Storm itself moves 16. Then you can disembark the squad inside at 3 inches and then move them 6. So you can go 25 inches and still perform actions like retrieve Knockman data or teleport homers or banners or whatever you want to do. Plus, it's just a really cheap module. It's 125 points for the Scout Squad plus the Storm to just be sitting inside, like on an objective somewhere. Where if your opponent comes up to try to kill it, you lose the Storm. The Scout Squad gets out, retains control of the objective, and they have to go in and root the Scout Squad out actually to remove them. So good stuff from Sam Procopio's Blood Angels list. Really. Nice to see him take down an event. We saw some Harlequins do well in that event. We did see another Tau list. And then I think probably the last thing we're going to talk about today. We did see a little bit of a showing from Adeptus Sororitas too. We have a 2nd place at War Games for Warriors. And down here at Northwest GT in the UK, it was won by Mike Porter playing Thousand Suns. But we also saw Vic VJ, who was an absolutely phenomenal player. I think at the start of the year, #1 ITC for quite a while. After winning a bunch of GTs over in the UK. And he and Adam lane second and third, both with Adeptus Sororitas. So I think Adeptus Sororitas making a comeback, especially since I think people figured out how good they are at secondary objectives now that they have like Leap of Faith baked into their secondaries. But the other thing I want to talk about is at Branson Brawl, the number of additional Space Marine lists that we saw do well. So, we've talked about Iron Hands, first place, Blood Angels, first place. We have a Space Wolves, third place at War Games for Warriors, and then fourth, fifth at Branson Brawl, we have Salamanders, Ultramarines. They're coming back, Chad. The Space Marines are coming back with a vengeance. So this is a Salamanders list. Looks like baked around Relic Terminators. So Salamanders now obviously get their they can improve their save against 1 damage weapons, I believe, with their stratagem. And then they also, have Armor of Contempt on top of that, and they ignore wound rerolls. So a lot of the tech we're talking about right now, especially like Tau, where you are rerolling wounds because of, like Precision of the Hunter, Exemplar of the Monka, even just your Monka bonus. There's so many ways to reroll your wound rolls, and none of them work. And especially against like Tau, Sept, and Farsight Enclaves to get that floating reroll as well. None of those work against Salamanders. So they actually become much more resilient in a lot of matchups. So if you're worried about, playing against those, Salamanders and Valorous Heart out of Adeptus Sororitas both do that. But otherwise, it looks like we're just sort of forcing the multi-melta theme, I guess, which is cute. 2 units of 3 multi-melta attack bikes, so 6 multi-meltas there. 4 more multi-meltas in a Devastator's drop squad. Yeah. An Impulsor. It used to be that you could charge out of the Impulsor, probably ferrying the Assault Intercessor squad, and then another Eradicator squad. So 6 multi-meltas, 10 multi-meltas. These guys basically count as multi-meltas because they shoot twice. So another 6. So 16? 16 multi-meltas? No big deal. I'm glad that we have committed to the bit pretty heavily. 2 Landspeeder Storms to score engage on all fronts probably and good Osa moment and stuff like that. And then the Impulsor. We have a Primaris Apothecary with Vox of Spiritum that increases the range of his aura, so he can give a 6-up damage ignore to everything within 6 inches rather than 3. And other than that, we do have it's a Phobos Librarian, interestingly, with Stealth Adept, which I'm not entirely sure I know what it does. Save me. Wikipedia, save me. What does Stealth Adept do? Unless it's the closest eligible target, you cannot be targeted by ranged attack. So you basically get old school character protection. Which that's interesting, I guess. I don't know what the secret tech there is. I guess he can, because he's a support character, he can sort of sit on your home objective and pass buffs down the chain while being untargetable. So you can kind of just hold down your back objective without having to worry about it, which is pretty cute. I like that. Plus it requires him to be visible, right? So he can, if you have good line of sight blocking in the middle, oh no, closest eligible, just kidding. Not closest visible. I was going to say that like old school or new school character protection prevents you from being targeted by indirect fire. So you could potentially even put yourself in a center objective, and as long as you have line of sight blockers in front of you, you're kind of just immune. But I can understand, because the list is so aggressive with all those multi-meltas, you want to be pushing up the table with the list. And that's generally how Salamanders work. So Salamanders have a tough time sometimes fighting over their back line because they also tend to be so slow. So having a dude who could just stand there and be like, this objective's mine, also that guy's -1 to be hit, seems good. I like that. And then we have this Ultramarines list, 4-1. Very nice. Chief Librarian Tigurius, seeing a comeback here. Love that guy. Gets that nice reroll cast. Feels pretty good. We have a Bike Captain, Adept of the Codex to give some CP regeneration. And he is a chapter master with Teeth of Terra. Okay, seems fine. We have a Seal of Oath on a Primaris Tech Marine. Does that mean we're bringing a bunch of Redemptor Dreadnoughts? It sure does! Triple Redemptor Dreadnoughts, 1 Relic Contemptor, twin Volkite Culverins, and 2 Victor Tactical Warsuits. 2 Land Speeder Storms, Eliminator Squad. I think a lot of Ultramarine players, I think, have been sort of building the same list. I did just commentate one of these when I was at Portal GT. Very similar list, almost identical. In fact, I think it just took... it was double Redemptor. I think it was double Contemptor with melee weapons. It was 1 Volkite Culverin and then a melee so that they could fight. And then the double Invictor Tactical Warsuit. And that's so that you can rapid redeploy back into your deployment zone if the first turn rollout doesn't go well. So you can deploy them really aggressively. You can screen out enemy forward deployers, and you can threaten like a big alpha strike from them. And then if you lose the roll to go first, they just become gun batteries, and they run to the back of your outside of your line of sight blockers in your deployment zone. You also have a little bit of additional forward deploy, and it's always kind of funny that because of that, the redeployment, you end up building Ultramarines lists that look like Raven Guard lists. So we have Eliminator squads being played, we have Incursor squads, Infiltrator squads, Invictor Tactical Warsuits. It's just a bunch of stuff that deploys in the middle of the table to then run away if you don't win the roll off. And then that all gets a Seal of Oath reroll against the big enemy unit. So like, there's so many big Death Star units in the game right now. Especially like those big 9-man Tyranid Warrior bricks, the big huge Crisis Battlesuit bricks that we've been talking about, and just picking the most dangerous one of those and being like, if it leaves cover, I'm going to kill it. That seems pretty good. So yeah, I don't know. I've actually, after going through lists for this past weekend, I've been much happier with the state of the game than I have in a while. And again, there might be some reasons for that. This obviously was the most populous, in terms of events, the most populous weekend for a while, which means that a lot of the big players might have gone to some of the larger events, which kind of opened up these smaller events to get picked up by the less well-known players, I guess, who are generally going to be playing like the top-tier meta armies. I have no idea if that's necessarily the case, because a lot of these events are also overseas. They're not in the U.S., so they aren't necessarily going to experience that same phenomenon. So I'm not 100% sure, but we did see, especially on these smaller GTs, a very diverse top 5. A lot of Space Marines showing up, Imperial Knights showing up, Adeptus Sororitas showing up. We saw some Thousand Suns have success. Super cool. But obviously then the big events were a lot of Tau Empire, ton of Tau Empire, plus a bunch of Tyranids. Now, I guess we do have to answer the question in the thumbnail of the video. Are Tau still overpowered? I'm not sure that that's entirely the case. And I think that they would probably be very good if the other super high scoring placing factions got nerfed and they didn't. But I imagine what we'll see is some changes to Crisis Battlesuits moving into the Nephilim season. And I would hope that the remainder of the army stays relatively the same, because I think I actually, in fact, would like to see some buffs to Tau, but to the lesser played Tau units. I'd like to see potentially the larger battle suits get a points cut. So Riptides for sure, maybe Ghost Keels, although they seem okay. The problem is that their AP is so low against they sort of cap at AP2 unless you're playing Fusion Colliders, which kind of sucks. And that's pretty brutal against Armor of Contempt. So like an Armor of Contempt in coverage doesn't even care about a Ghost Kill, which is sad. But I don't know whether or not that's worth like cutting their points for. I don't know. But I would like to see some of the larger battle suits get played again if we see some changes to Crisis battle suits. But I do think, especially things like Riptides, are way too expensive, and hopefully we see some changes there. If half of Tau isn't having its obsec stripped, things aren't fair. What would lose objective secured in Tau? Just like Kroot? Would you like remove obsec from Kroot? I could see that, but like they're just troops. I don't know if they need that for sure. Don't think GW can nerf Eldar and Tyranids and also not nerf some of Tau. I think I agree with that for sure. Piranhas need help, yeah, definitely. I do know there are some people very excited about piranhas because they're some of the most efficient points per wound in the game if you split their drones off, because then you get an additional 2 wounds out of the drone. But I don't think that. I think that's mostly a meme, to be fair. So if you just take like billions of piranhas with split drones, it's kind of whatever. But it's a little silly. Crisis suits have OBSEC in the sub faction, yeah, and crisis suits can get OBSEC from enforcer commanders, right? But I feel like that's such a trade-off, though, right? Because if you take the OBSEC sub faction, you're restricting access to a ton of characters, right? So like if we're comparing the OBSEC sub faction we talked about earlier, which is it was play their part plus the other one that gives them objective secured when they charge. I don't remember the name. You get the better primary objective control, but you lose compared to Farsight Enclaves and Tausept. You lose like Long Strike, you lose Farsight, you lose all the faction secondaries, you lose all the faction stratagems. Excuse me. You don't lose Shadow Sun because she can get taken anywhere, because she's a Supreme Commander. But I do feel like it is an actual trade-off. I don't feel like it's as cut and dry as like people are like, crisis suits have OBSEC because you always take the sub-faction. Like, do you? Because all these lists that won events sure didn't. And you clearly don't need it, I guess. Yeah. I think the reroll access is definitely really good. Crushing for sure. But I do. I also think it's interesting because I think that there are Tau lists that aren't like necessarily predicated on crisis battle suits. That do like they exist in the ether and they just haven't been brought to bear yet. And I do think that like you could probably play like a Fish of Fury list that was like, Devilfish and Breachers and stuff. That would probably be just fine. Maybe not quite as effective as Crisis Battlesuits, but I think it would be okay. And I think even if you just bumped points cost in Crisis Battlesuits a little bit, the faction would survive for sure. The goal is that most factions should have a roughly equal shot to win. Yeah, you're basically trying to massage the win percentages. And right now, like it's been a roller coaster ride of win percentages. Like new factions have been coming up with like a 60 or 70% win rate, and then getting nerfed like multiple times and getting down to like 55% for the next faction to then pop up. But it's mostly also just driving the lower factions further and further. So the striation right now is super high, but the goal is to get everything within like 45 to 55%, basically like that 10% swing in the middle. And I certainly think it's doable. But the balance upon release of these factions so far has been not good. Super bad. Big reason you kept Broadside in your lists. They don't need core when you still have reroll. Yeah. And I think, a lot of lists are playing like between 1 and 3 individual broadsides, specifically in Tausept, because they get the reroll access for sure. Yeah, but I do think there were some comments about how like, oh, Tau's like a no-skill faction, whatever, and I think that's just wrong. I think using your movement effects to the best of your ability is a big deal, and being able to prioritize correctly with these like massive swaths of weapons is also a very big deal. I don't think, plus you have to keep in mind, like, you have to receive damage efficiently too. So you have to operate not only in your own movement and shooting phases basically perfectly, but also in your opponent's combat phases too, because you have the split profiles between drones and battlesuits. And messing that up can lose you a ton of efficiency over the course of the game. I don't think Tau is like this point-and-click adventure game, but I do think that the double or triple broadside days were a point-and-click adventure game. I think that release Tau, probably the lowest skill army I've ever seen any like the game release. And Adeptus Mechanicus was released at one point. Release Adeptus Mechanicus was fucking wild. And I think Tau was way more powerful. Even like AdMech 6 plane, like you at least had to turn the planes, but the broadside list, like players literally would just deploy all their broadsides on the line and then blast the clock and then win the game. Just ridiculous, absolutely silly. So I'm glad that Tau like are an interesting faction, and I do think that I do think that there's a lot of skill required to play Tau. The one thing that I would like to see change of Tau, though, is I would like to see homing beacons removed. Maybe that's my personal crusade against turn 1 deep strikes, but I think turn 1 deep strikes are like toxic to the game, and I think I would like to get rid of them. And I think the Tau Sept one is particularly egregious because you can sort of do it safely, like basically from anywhere on the table. So it doesn't require you to also take this transport. You take a squad that like operates independently, and then if you have a large enough battlesuit team, it deploys the battlesuit team basically anywhere on the table. Because all you need is one model to be within the 6-inch range of the homing beacon. So you can just like keep the stealth suit team in your deployment zone and then deploy a crisis battlesuit team in your opponent's deployment zone. It's like the stupidest thing ever. If I were to make one change to Tau Empire, points decreases, that would be number one. Number one is get rid of homing beacons. Number two is points decreases for big battlesuits. Number three is points increases for crisis. And I think the game is the faction's probably fine. Yeah, chat. No alpha strikes. Get them out of here. It's so bad. Like, it's like, it's not at the point where it's like a ubiquitous threat, right? It was for a while. And for a while, Space Marines had it in every list. You would always play against drop pods. And some factions, and maybe I'm biased because I'm a player who did not have a way to defend against them. I had I played Tyranids. We had no pregame moves. We had no forward deploy. Unless you spent CP and reinforcement paints on one of the worst stratagems in the game. And so you just had no recourse against turn 1 deep strikes. And now most factions have forward deploy. And even when most factions have forward deploy, first off, GW is trying to like mitigate the power of forward deploy by including missions like Abandoned Sanctuaries where you can't use your forward deploy. So enemy turn 1 deep strikers will just do whatever the fuck they want. But then on top of that, it's not like not every faction has it, right? Tau have it, Eldar have it, but theirs is kind of bad. Tyranids have it, and Space Marines have it, and that's mostly it, right? I think that's basically all the turn 1 deep strikes. So you see it in like maybe 20% of games, and it's like an open question whether or not you just change the entire paradigm of your list in order to fight against turn 1 deep strikes by including a bunch of screening units that can pregame move or can forward deploy or can do all these things to screen you out, with a 10% chance that they don't even work because you played on Abandoned Sanctuaries. So like the arithmetic is that you generally won't take those units if they make if they like significantly impact your other matchups, because you're gonna have a worse chance in 20% of your games, and in 10% of those they won't even matter. So like you're just flipping a coin every game of whether or not you just get boned by big deep strikes, and it's just stupid. It just sucks. Ugh, I hate it. Random question, why aren't flyers used anymore? They are. But generally speaking, you play flyers when the flyers is offensively efficient, basically. And flyers have been so problematic so many times that GW is basically now just tacking on like 50 or 60 extra points to every flyer that they play, which is why you typically don't see them. But we just talked about Adam Camilleri's list. Oh no, he was playing Dark Talons. Those are the aircraft, right? Or no, those are the plasma speeders. No, a land speeder Vengeance is the plasma speeder. Yeah. So he was playing airplanes. Tyranid lists typically play airplanes because the Harpies are super efficient. I'm sure we can find some. Not this one. Egg on my face. Oh no, there it is. Yeah, 2 Harpies. The first one I clicked on. Anytime it's High Fleet Leviathan, you can probably expect two harpies. So it's less about like whether or not you play flyers full stop, and more about whether the flyer that you have is good. If the flyer is good, you'll play it. If it's not amazing, then you probably won't. But yeah, it is true that I think flyers have been like if I were to reinvent 40k from the ground up right now, flyers wouldn't be in it. I think because or they would be like they were on release. So I remember when I think the Valkyrie came out, which was like one of the first planes that ever got released for 40k, which was like wild when it happened, which was back in 5th edition. It was just a regular vehicle, which sounds weird, right, when you think about it? Or the Storm Raven gunship, actually, it might have been the first one. I think it was Storm Ravens. Were Storm Ravens first? No, I don't remember. It doesn't matter. Who cares? But when the first pseudo flyers came out, they were just skimmer vehicles. So they basically operated identically to like a Wave Serpent. So if you just imagine like a Falcon, and it's just like that's how planes worked. It was just a thing that had like a high movement. And the fly keyword, like the fly ability, then that's how that was. And I think you could do that. Like, just make it it's like, it moves 16 inches. I don't know. It moves kind of fast. That would be like the one acceptable use of flyers, in my opinion. But the fact, infinite moving units in 40k, not good. It's just bad. There's like no way to make that not just garbo. But the problem was that like you can't think of too many flyers right now because they keep getting nerfed because GW keeps every time GW releases a flyer that's efficiently points costed, it destroys the game. For like 2 months, the game is unplayably bad. And they just keep doing it over and over and over again. So, it was back in 8th edition, it was Eldar flyers, because you could stack multiple penalties to hit on them, and you would take between 6 and 8 airplanes in a list, and that was the most competitive list for a while. Even moving on further in 9th edition, you had Orc flyers when they came out. You had AdMech 6 plane. I would say I'm probably a biased weirdo, but I think Harry Dan's like borderline kind of busted. And he's a big old flyer boy. Not anymore. He sucks now. But Crusher Stampede, Harry Dan, they were like probably 90% of the armies in the game literally couldn't deal with them. They would just lose. But those 10% would win every time. So it was a trade-off. But I think like playing against the faction that was unprepared for a flyer that could kill stuff and not die, which is every flyer that comes out that's super strong if it's good offensively and defensively, it's automatically good because it already has mobility down pat. So if you play against one of those and you don't have the silver bullet for it, there's nothing you can do. You can't hide from it. You can't survive it. You can't kill it before it hits you. You just die. It's bad. It's bad stuff. No good. Yeah. So I think the options are to make them into normal vehicles or remove them from the game. And I wish they would do one of those things, but they probably won't. So glad the Harry Dan days are over. No, he's so fun. Except the times where your opponent had no way to fight him, and then he would kill them. There were definitely some games. There were a lot of games with Harry Dan that were like, this is really cool. Like the target priority is really important, and like the maneuvering is really, crucial. And then there were some games where like your opponent would just be like, what do I do against this knight that moves 40 inches and shoots as hard as 2 knights? And you're like, I don't know. You just die, I guess. It's so bad. Very dumb. It was speaking of knights, Crushing, it was the knights matchup. When you hit the knights matchup with that thing, it was insane. They're like, so I can't charge it because it flies. And like, yeah. And they're like, well, and it kills 1.8 knights a turn with its guns. And you're like, yeah. And you're like, and it kills probably another like 9/10 of a knight in melee every turn. I'm like, yeah. And you're like, and it overruns out of threat range after it kills them. I'm like, yeah. You're like, what do I do? And you're like, I think you lose. Almost one turn here in a fight with 3 Castellans. Like Castellan robots? That's kind of cool. That's fun. Would be cool for them to be implemented as pseudo strategies where you use CP to call in air support. I agree with that for sure. I think that's the correct way to implement aircraft into like a tabletop game, into like a ground scale game. You play like Epic, 40k Epic or whatever, Epic Armageddon. You can do whatever you want. Like you can put an airplane in that just fine. You get shot with a laser beam. Who cares? But that's how Flames of War does it. That's how a ton of games do it, and I think that's the correct way to do it. I think it would, like, what you want is a way for it to be representative on the table, but you still like use the model, and maybe you have it as like maybe it just shows up like one turn, or I think that's how they used to work for a while. Is that they would show up on the table, you could interact with them, and then they would fly off for a turn, and then they would show up again. Which has basically the similar problems, but at least they don't hit you every turn. Need both hammerheads to take down Harry Dan or a knight. 2 hammerheads doesn't even kill Harry Dan. Harry Dan sure kills 2 hammerheads, though. All right, chat. Well, I think we're winding down here, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. But thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me. Whoa, we talked for a long time. These lists are sick, dude. This last weekend had some super cool results, and I'm glad that we got to go over them. I hope that I end up having the time to go over some of them in more depth. I think that would be sweet in individual videos, but yeah, I don't know. And I'm hoping that we just see this kind of metagame more commonly as we move forward into the Nephilim season, because that's what I would like to see, for sure. Yeah. Cool. Bring back implant attack. Yeah. Justice for my implant attack, please. All right, chat. Well, thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me. That's it for Tactical Tuesday this week. If you haven't checked it out, check out my video on the new Nephilim reveals from earlier today. I did a whole video on just that specifically, where I talked about all the secondaries and stuff that were previewed. It's some good friggin' stuff. So that's also on the channel that premiered just before this stream went live, so that's good stuff. I'm also going to be streaming. I'm probably streaming every day for the rest of the week on the Twitch. I have a bunch of games lined up, so it should be good. And I'm very excited about that. So come hang out with me, twitch.tv/tacticaltortoisetv. And yeah. That's it. Remember to keep it classy, folks. Have happy wargaming and stuff.